We only have about 10% of our 50,000 students that are actively using the online platforms that we've provided, because a lot of our families don't have access to a device or internet access.
A lot of people are talking about schools, so we wanted to talk about it as well. And joining me is Dr. Nikolai Vitti. He is the superintendent of the Detroit Public School Community District. Dr. Vitti, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm well. My family is healthy.
Good.
My extended family obviously is suffering a bit economically with losing their jobs, but I can say that everyone's healthy at this point. So that's positive. Unfortunately, we're seeing more employees sick, and tragically, we learned of deaths in the organization today. So I'm sad to report that we had some employees pass last night, and was notified today. So it's horrifying that we're actually talking about people that were with us only 2 weeks ago now passing.
I'm so sorry to hear that. This has been an extraordinary time for so many people, and we are all suffering loss, knowing a connection to somebody. Now, as the numbers of cases grow, I guess, could you kind of put into words what this has been like for you and leading the district in these last 3 weeks, and having to change, turn on a dime, everything that you're doing, and concentrate in entirely new and different ways?
Yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard. I think more than anything else, just emotionally knowing the negative impact the virus is having on families and individuals. I think that's probably the hardest part of all of this. Like I said, luckily I have been healthy and my immediate family has been healthy. So I think that has allowed me to focus on what the organization needs. And what we've been trying to do is just stay very much proactive in our communication and transparent regarding where things stand with us, and then what's happening at the state level regarding the shutdown and finances. And I think most employees have appreciated the rapid communication and the ongoing conversation and communication about confirmed cases, deaths, and just where we stand with going back to school, if ever, and what we can do more to support our students and families through this shutdown.
Yeah, and we'll get to that, because I know that you came out a week ago and said, look, this should all be shut down. Online learning should be mandatory now through the end of the year. But before we get to that, tell me a little bit about what parents and students are communicating to you right now. You talked a little bit about how staff has been back and forth with you. What are parents saying, and what are kids sharing with you?
So I think if we go back a couple weeks, I think parents appreciated the call to close schools when we started to make that call. And I do want to recognize the governor as a leader who has been thoughtful, who has been listening. From the very beginning, I was one of the first superintendents to raise my hand to say we really shouldn't be in school. And she listened, and other voices came forward as well. So I think parents and employees appreciated the initial closure of school. Since then, the governor has been listening about a long-term plan. But right now, what we're hearing from parents is a level of frustration, honestly, about the need for more learning to take place at home, and the reality of the digital divide. We only have about 10% of our 50,000 students that are actively using the online platforms that we've provided, because a lot of our families don't have access to a device or internet access. And so that is something that we are now actively trying to problem solve with businesses and philanthropists to possibly, if the shutdown continues, to give every family a device and internet access if this is going to be prolonged. But that's really what we're hearing from families is, how can the district help families gain consistent access to a device and internet? What could they be doing at the home if they don't have the technology? And then a lot of questions from seniors and parents of seniors about what does graduation ceremonies look like, prom, what does graduation requirements look like with a long-term shutdown? That's mainly what we've heard from families. And I'd also add access to food. So we've had 17 distribution sites that have been giving out breakfast and lunch. We've shifted to giving pre-cooked meals over long periods of time. Mondays, 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches for 3 days, and then on Thursdays, 4 breakfasts, 4 lunches to go into the weekend. Last Thursday, we had over 30,000 families take food for their students. So that just gives you a sense of the gravitas related to food security, and what we're still trying to provide as a resource and a gap for families through this crisis.
And the crisis really has shown the stark inequality between our districts across the state. And that really is the conversation that many people are having now. So you make the case for saying, look, we should shut down for the rest of the year, move to an online platform. What does that look like for the Detroit district? And what do you need then to put in place? And what do you think should be put in place across the state?
Well, I commended Dr. Rice's decision, the state superintendent, that learning should not be required and learning shouldn't be given with grades or credits. And I think the reason he did that is because he does recognize the inequity throughout our communities regarding access to consistent technology. And if he didn't do that, then what we would have is a situation where the haves would continue to accelerate their learning with grade accumulation, credit accumulation, and just advancing at a faster pace than other families who economically don't have access to the same technology, or just the human capital that parents exist with multiple degrees or a degree period. So I commended him for that. I do believe that if schools are shut down, we should still be providing learning opportunities, just not required for a grade. One of the reasons why I've advocated to shut down is so that organizationally we can shift to providing more resources to families in this online type of platform and environment. And instead of waiting to suspend school every 2 to 3 weeks, we just say we're shutting down, and then I can completely shift. We can train teachers on more online platforms. We can rally the business community to try to get a device and internet access to every family. And then we just expand the resources online and continue to print packets for parents and students to complete at home and possibly turn that in for feedback. But we're prepared as DPSCD to shift the learning platform and just a delivery of instruction to a more online basis. That could mean using Teams as a technology platform, using FaceTime, using videoed lessons, and simply just calling in and touching in with students. 80% of our families have already been reached out to from school-based administrators and teachers, and we just want to continue that momentum, but tie it specifically to learning opportunities.
And what has the feedback been from the state to your suggestions, and how close do you believe we are to getting some kind of word out of Lansing?
Well, I think the governor gets it. I think she has understood the importance of communicating and showing access and providing resources in this crisis. I think the legislature has been quiet and frankly has not stepped up in order to directly support the executive branch in this crisis. My understanding from conversations that took place last week that the governor will be empowered through executive authority to issue some clarity regarding the continuation of school and possibly clarity around funding. What we've advocated for is what was previously budgeted per pupil should continue, and we should be funded for 180 days, so that way everyone can be employed, income can stay the same, and more importantly, we can shift to an online platform. If funding is reduced or 180 days of instruction aren't paid for, we're going to see a loss of effort from our employees with just providing consistency. I'm hopeful, optimistic that at some point this week, the governor and the legislature, just the governor, announces a shutdown of schools for the rest of the year and clarity around per pupil amount staying the same and 180 days being paid, and probably, which would be right, a required online learning plan that every district would have to create and implement, be reviewed by the state or ISDs, and then we can move forward in this new way of work.
Right, and there will be some kind of deadline that everyone would have to meet. You know, we continually have the conversation of falling behind, falling behind, falling behind. What do the test scores say? What does this do, I guess, for your students? What do you think it does for Michigan as a whole, and how do we regroup from this when we have to transition the entire way we've been teaching our kids?
Well, anyone who tells you that we haven't lost time instructionally or we haven't lost learning is just telling people what they want to hear. At the end of the day, you can't replicate being in a classroom with a certified teacher with a regular pace of instruction and assignments and feedback, coupled even with testing. So we've lost instructional time and we've lost instructional learning. Uh, Again, I just want to be direct and admit that up front. Now, I think we have to try to make up for as much lost time as possible and just continue the brain working through this crisis for our children. So they're still reading, they're talking about what they're reading, they're writing, they're doing mathematical problems, just to keep learning ongoing in a consistent habit of theirs. And then possibly if we can see a reduction of the curve with confirmed cases and deaths, maybe we can expand summer school for more enriched learning. But there's no question that when we hopefully start regularly in the fall, I think that there will be, and I'm being a bit optimistic here, but also this is based on my experience in Florida when we've dealt with hurricanes and we've shut down for long periods of time. What I've seen is that when people come back, they come back with a renewed sense of urgency, a sense of purpose that time is now of catching up. And I've already seen so many of our employees stepping up with reaching out to parents, videotaping, providing feedback now. And I just think everyone's going to be much more charged, appreciative of one another, of just what we do as educators. And I think that's all going to be seen, not only between now and we come back to school, but especially when we come back to school. So we can't make up necessarily for this lost time, and we are going to be slightly behind, but I'm optimistic that we'll be charged when we do come back together.
You know, you and I have talked a little bit about the mental well-being of students and trauma and the things, the stressors that they already have in their daily lives. This is additional stressor. If there was food security or there's food insecurity, now they're dealing with maybe death of a family member, the loss of routine, the loss of that connection in the classroom that was so important maybe to their daily lives. What amount of resource or what kind of conversations have you had about helping kids and families who are now facing yet another trauma in this pandemic?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, when you start to see the high number of deaths that we're seeing in Detroit, those are tied to families. You know, I already talked about how it's tied to our organization from an employee basis, but those employees are reaching out to say, my mother, my father, my uncle, my aunt, and it's inevitably affecting our children and their families. So, you know, when we talk about shifting the way we serve children between now and when we go back to school, part of that has to be a mental health connection as well. So I can envision using our guidance counselors, our social workers, our psychologists, even some contracted services differently between now and the beginning of the year, where we do more FaceTiming, Zoom, work with teams and that platform to just try to engage with our students directly. Even the feedback that I've received, even teachers calling parents and students and just students hearing their teacher's voice has been a joy to hear that feedback because it creates a sense of normalcy that our students are lacking, and the connection to adults that truly care about them. So that's what we're going to do differently if we have a shutdown, is just trying to connect individually again with our students and those that need more support, and possibly connecting them to grief counselors and the rest as we go through this crisis.
All right. So finally, what's your message to students? Here's your platform. What do you say to them right now?
Well, what I have continued to say is stay at home. Truly take heed to the shelter in place. I know our youth think that they're impenetrable to this virus, and although their at-risk status is less than us that are older, they can carry the virus. So I'm going to directly say stay at home, stay with those that you've already been with, but this is also an opportunity to fill gaps that exist in your learning with reading, doing math problems, and at the bare minimum, just pick a book up. Read, journal every day, talk about what you're reading to your family. At a minimal level, just read and talk about what you're reading and writing and journal. And this experience will never be forgotten for everyone, but for our students, it's an opportunity to journal. and write about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, their hopes, their fears, their anger, their frustration. And it'll be an opportunity to look back on that in future years and to future generations, that they'll be a part of, to share this experience through their own words, and it'll keep their vocabulary and their writing skills at a higher level.
All right. Well, Dr. Vitti, thanks so much for the time. We're going to continue to check in with you as this continues on. And we're so sorry for the loss of your school family so far, but we hope that you continue to be well and your family as well.
Same to you. Thank you for reaching out.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.